Hi, everyone. We are back. Again, my name is Ryan Young. I'm the Assistant Director of Regional Advancement at Miami University Regionals. In that role, I lead the Murals program, which stands for Miami University Regionals Alumni and Students. And it is our pleasure to bring you our next version, our next Life Hacks, Survival Skills 101. Today, we have with us a very special guest. His name is Will Duggar. Will is not only a Miami Regionals alum, but he was a former worker at the Philmont Scout Ranch. He was our student government president, holds not only a degree from Miami University, but an MBA as well. And on top of that, he now works as the district executive for the Boy Scouts of Middle Tennessee. And so without further ado, it is my honor to introduce to you Will. Before you come on, Will, I do want to say for anyone who does have questions today, there will be an opportunity at the bottom of your screen to ask a question. We encourage you to ask those questions today, and hopefully by the end of the presentation, we will have an opportunity to get to all those questions you have. So without further ado, again, thank you for coming, and here is our presenter, Will Duggar.
Thank you, Ryan. Hello, everyone. My name is Will. Thank you all for having me here today. It's great to be back here with Miami University. I have a little bit of background in survival and wilderness prep skills that I would like to share with you all, and I'm really thankful for Ryan and JJ for offering me the opportunity to be here in front of you all today. So we're going to talk a little bit about survival. Like Ryan had mentioned before, my name is Will, and I work currently as a district executive for the Middle Tennessee Council with the Boy Scouts of America. I attended Miami University and I graduated in 2019 with a BA in Communication Studies. After that, I went on to Wright State University in 2020 to pursue my MBA in Project Management, and I graduated from Wright State in 2021. What forms my background experience in wilderness survival and preparation is my time that I spent working out at Philmont Scout Ranch with the Boy Scouts of America. From 2015 to 2019, I spent 5 summer seasons working at the ranch in New Mexico as a guide. We referred to that position as a ranger. And I spent 2 years working as a standard rank and file mountain guide. And then afterwards, I went on to be a training supervisor. In 2018, we had a very unique year. I'll talk about it here in my presentation, where we had a wildfire that burned and wiped out about 30,000 acres of our program property out of 200,000 acres. So during that year, I worked specifically as a fire recovery work crew foreman. And then in the following year, the last year that I spent working out at Philmont Scout Ranch, I was a training program coordinator, training and leading 60 cadets and midshipmen from the 3 U.S. military academies out at Philmont Scout Ranch to be mountain guides, to be rangers for a 4-week period out of their summer. During my entire tenure out at the ranch, I was also a member of the New Mexico State Search and Rescue Team out of Philmont Scout Ranch, and I achieved my ICS 100 and 200 level certifications from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So I want to talk a little bit about preparedness and survival. Why preparedness? You all are familiar with the fact that our world is changing dramatically. In the outdoor community, we call that the uncontrollables. The uncontrollables that you find in real life situations are geopolitical shifts. We just had an election last year that resulted in tremendous national unrest and a lot of instability. We also have economic stability as well as another uncontrollable in the real world environment. You're familiar with the fact that we currently are in the middle of a supply chain issue. If you go to the grocery stores, if you go to the gas stations, you see that prices are continuously rising. These are factors that are beyond our realm of control. We also have global health crises as well that can be another real world uncontrollable factor. As we had talked about just previously, that we, over the last year and a half, have been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has brought about a tremendous amount of uncertainty in the real world environment. These same uncontrollables exist in the outdoors as well. And survival skills learned in the outdoors can help translate to survival skills in real life scenarios to prepare you for the worst case scenarios. When people think about survival and preparedness, they think about what can go wrong, what will go wrong. But the mindset that you need to gear yourself towards when preparing and learning how to survive in the outdoors is adopting a positive mindset. I'll mention it before, but wilderness survival skills is more so of a preparatory skill set, not so much a reactionary skill set. So the first step in preparing for success and a positive journey and experience in the outdoors is planning ahead and preparing. It's actually our first principle in Leave No Trace principles, which we can talk about here in the questions following the presentation. But before you go, you need to spend time preparing. Time spent preparing equals success in execution. You need to start to anticipate some key factors. Who's going with you? Your situational awareness, the terrain that you're going to be around, weather and climate, equipment and communications. You need to take into consideration these four main factors whenever you're preparing for a journey or an experience in the outdoors. Develop strategic time to anticipate these potential roadblocks. And from there, you can develop your contingencies. And it doesn't have to be complex. Whether you're new to being out in the outdoors, or if you're an experienced veteran that's been hiking for the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's extremely important for you to have these contingencies planned and ready for, so that way you can execute them in the event that something were to go wrong. You're already prepared at that point. So the first of those four key factors, who's going with you? Never hike or camp alone. It's simply for your safety. We've heard about an unfortunate situation in the news headlines lately that it's really easy for one individual or even a couple individuals to be extremely vulnerable in the outdoors. It's very important that you bring in a group of people that you can rely on, people that you can trust, and then you can relay and work those contingencies out in a large group setting. Most search and rescue cases that are in the backcountry typically involve only one subject. And when we're talking about one subject or a subject, that is a person of interest, someone who's gone missing. It typically involves one individual. Seldom do you ever see a search and rescue case that involves multiple individuals that are missing. In the hiking community, we have a general rule of thumb is hike in fours. There is strength in numbers. If one person is injured, so to speak, then another person can stay behind with that individual while you have two others that carry on to call for help and get that assistance that's needed. It's also important to have situational awareness. Where are we going? Specifically identify and familiarize yourself with the terrain that you're going to be in. This could be trails, campsites, geographic landmarks. These three main factors are really important for situational awareness and helping you understand where you're going, where you are. And at any point in time, if you ever feel like you're lost, you can fall back on those three facets to help refamiliarize yourself with the territory that you're in. The most common reason that people get lost is simply due to a lack of situational awareness. National Geographic came out with a report that from 2002 to 2014, out of 46,000 search and rescue cases, 41% of those individuals, 41% of those cases were simply day hikers. These aren't people that are going out on 5 to 12-day journeys or expeditions. These are individuals who are going out for a day hike that are just simply wanted to take a load off and just enjoy the outdoors, but they did not take the time to familiarize themselves with the terrain, which is why you have such a great majority of individuals who are simply day hikers that are the plurality of your cases. Weather and climate is another important factor to take in consideration when you're planning ahead and preparing. Similar to situational awareness, it's extremely important for you to familiarize yourself and understand the weather patterns. Another general rule of thumb that we have in the hiking community is that weather below the mountain is not the same as weather on top of the mountain. Most generic phone apps, weather apps that you pull up on your phone, will only localize you to the nearest city or town for weather forecasts. And if you're an experienced individual that has spent a lot of time hiking in the outdoors, you know that that is extremely inaccurate information to base your understanding on. Radar will provide the most accurate information based on the terrain that you're in. So what's really important is for you just to familiarize yourself with what a radar looks like, what it tells you, understanding high pressure, low pressure, weather fronts. It's extremely important for you to familiarize yourself with these particular tools so that way you are geared towards a better mindset of preparedness. And understand, too, that weather patterns do differ drastically based off of geography and elevation. And the best place to go for this information is simply to go to the National Weather Service. There's a lot of information there that can inform you on how to read a radar and to understand weather patterns that are in your specific area. Equipment and communications is another key factor that is really important when taking into consideration and planning ahead and preparing for your journey. How long are you going to be out? How accessible is your destination? There are some things that you need to consider, such as cell service. If you don't have any cell service in the region, then where are your nearest highways and roads, your emergency roads? How can a vehicle get to me in the event that we run into a situation that requires immediate help? And then also your accessibility to civilization. Are you going to Hocking Hills State Park, which is only 50 miles away, and 2 miles from the nearest town? Or are you going out on an expedition in the Smokies or in the Rockies that could be anywhere upwards from 10 to 20 miles away from the nearest town? These are all serious situations that you need to take into consideration when planning your journey, so that way you can determine the amount of gear that you bring and how much of that you will need. On that note, it's important to never pack for the sake of weight alone. If there's something that you absolutely need, but it might weigh a couple pounds, don't forego that item just because you're worried about it weighing too much on your back. That will make all the difference between a fun journey and a miserable journey. So we talked a little bit about equipment. Now we're going to actually jump into gear. Your gear is your assets that you will lean on heavily when you're out in the outdoors conducting your journey. 10 essentials that you require in every pack, whether it's a 12-day trip or a short weekend getaway or even a day hike. There are 10 essentials that must be in every bag. For one, you'll require a map and a compass. A map and a compass are extremely important, and that helps you familiarize, like I mentioned before, with situational awareness and understanding the territory that you're going to be in. You need sun and insect protection. You need water and extra food. It's extremely important, and what we typically encourage individuals who are going out on the trail is to carry with them anywhere from 2 to 4 liters of water. Now, this could be carried in a variety of different ways. I'll talk a little bit about that moving down the line, but you want to be sure that you're bringing enough water with you so that way you're prepared, you can hydrate, and in the event when it comes time to cooking, if you're planning to cook a dehydrated meal, you have water available to you to do that as well. Understand where you can get your water as well. Rain gear and extra clothing. Clothing does add weight, but like I mentioned before, you never want to forego an item specifically because of the weight. If you're going out into a dry, arid climate that could reach anywhere from below freezing to sub-zero temperatures, you want to be sure that you're carrying with you adequate gear that will help protect you in those situations and in those environments. You want to be sure that you bring with you a first aid kit. This doesn't have to be a trauma kit or an ER or an ICU kit. This is simply a first aid kit that you can go out to Dick's Sporting Goods or Walmart to buy at a very cheap, minimal cost, but you want to be sure that you're carrying with you in your first aid kit the basic essentials of Band-Aids, gauze, bandages, Neosporin, and such. You want to be sure that you have those fundamental assets with you in terms of first aid and first response, so that way you can react to any emergency medical situation. You also want to be sure that you're carrying with you some form of a fire starter. Now, that could be matches, that could be a lighter, that could be flint and steel, or some form of kindling to help you start a fire. There are typically fire starter kits that you can pick up at REI that are very useful, and I highly recommend you take a look at them. They're about $20 to $35, but they're very useful, especially in a situation where you're out in an environment that doesn't have a lot of foliage. You want to be sure that you have assets that you can help you build a fire in a minimal environment and help you keep warm at night. You also want to be sure that you're carrying with you some form of a pocket knife or a multi-tool. This isn't so much necessarily meant for protection as much as it is another tool that you can use in your tool belt that will help you navigate the outdoor environment in an effective manner. You want to be sure that you're carrying with you some sort of a timekeeping device, a watch. Do not rely on your phones to help you keep track of time. As you're familiar, as you go throughout the day, whether you're at work or in classes, that battery can drain extremely quickly due to all the tasks that phone is running in the background. So even if you are carrying an extra battery, you want to be sure that you have a reliable timepiece that can help you keep track of time when you're in the outdoors, because light can vary differently based on the geography that you're in, and it's very important for you to keep track of that. A flashlight is also very important when you're navigating terrain at night. You never want to hike at night, but in the situation where you find yourself in the outdoors, you always want to be sure that you have a way to help you see, particularly in those darker situations. And you want to carry with you a whistle. A whistle simply meant for emergency purposes in the event that you need to get the attention of a team that might be looking for you, or you need to call attention to a particular area in the backcountry. These are the 10 essentials that you want to be sure that you carry with you in every pack, no matter what type of journey that you're going out on. So now we'll talk a little bit about the pack. You need to be sure that your pack has the capability to carry with you your personal gear, your sleeping accommodations, your food, and your water. Think of it as an extension to everything that you have at home. If you were to pack up your home right now, you want your home to fit in that particular pack. Now, I'm not talking about furniture. I'm talking about the essentials that you need to be out in the outdoors. If you're going out on a 12-day journey, then you want to be sure that you are carrying with you a home unit that is capable of supplying you 12 days worth of supplies. Make sure that your pack is reliable, durable, and capable. You never want to forego a pack just because of the cost, much like you never want to forego an item in your pack because of weight. And there are two main types of packs that you can invest in. There are internal frames and external frames. and each pack has their degree of benefit. Internal frames is the pack type that I use. It's more convenient. It's easier on my back. And you can pack all of your items in that particular pack, as opposed to external frames, which provide an added storage benefit on the outside on the rigging, where you're able to attach more larger items that won't necessarily fit in your pack to the outside that will enhance your carrying capacity. Again, you want to be sure that you're buying for quality. Don't let a price tag dictate whether your trip is a fun trip or a miserable trip. So right here, you can see that there are two different types of packs. The pack on the left side of your screen is what we call an external frame. As you can see, there are metal frames that are protruding from the outside of the pack, and that runs along the back side. You'll look at that and you'll think that that's very uncomfortable, and I don't want to hike with that. But as you can see, there's some padding there that will help reinforce that. But really what the rigging is for, like I mentioned, is to help you attach larger items to the outside of your pack that will maximize the storage and carrying capacity that you have in those inner compartments. And on the right side of your screen, you have an internal frame. You can see there is no metal frames that are protruding from the back of that pack. And I have a visual that I want to share with you of what an internal frame pack actually looks like. So as you can see, and again, based off of the picture that was shown in your slide, you can see that there are no frames that are protruding from this particular pack. This is all padded, and everything, all of my storage carrying capacity is on the inside of the pack. And this is very helpful in the event of rain, inclement weather, that all of your stuff is guaranteed to stay dry. If you turn it to the back profile, you can see all of the compartment capabilities that this particular kind of pack has. I really enjoy using this pack for those who are gearheads. This is a Kelty Red Cloud, a 90 liter. And I like carrying larger packs because I want to make sure that I'm maximizing the storage carrying capacity that I'm bringing with me out on the trail. The type of pack that you bring with you is really important as well, because you want to be sure that you're accounting for volume and the amount of time you're going to be spending out on the trail. A typical day bag or a go bag is where a 20 or 30 liter, or this is a 45 liter pack. This pack is capable of carrying with you, like I mentioned before in the presentation, your 10 essentials, but it's not necessarily conducive to long-term expeditions out in the backcountry. So you want to be sure that when you're shopping for a pack, you're buying a pack that is capable to carry with you for the amount of time that you're out on the backcountry trail. So now we're going to talk a little bit about packing list. Your packing list is contingent on the amount of time that you plan to spend out in the backcountry. For longer trips, will you have the chance to resupply? For shorter trips, are you carrying enough with you? You want to be sure that you're taking these into consideration when you're preparing your packing list. But no matter what, your basic categories in your packing list are sleeping, clothing, footwear, cookware, and other miscellaneous items. For your sleeping category, you want to be sure that you're carrying with you the right sleeping bag. I live in Middle Tennessee. I live in Nashville. If I were to go out on a short hike over at Fall Creek Falls State Park or the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, then my 40-degree sleeping bag will probably be conducive for the environment that I'm going to be sleeping in the outdoors in the evening hours. However, a 40-degree sleeping bag is not conducive if I want to take a journey up into the Tetons or in the Great Rocky Mountains. I want to be sure that I'm carrying with me a pack that is capable of keeping me warm late at night when those temperatures could dip below freezing or sub-zero temperatures. For clothing, we talked about it before, but it's extremely important that you carry with you the adequate amount of clothing that you need. You want to take into consideration your base layers, the type of shirt that you're wearing. You want some over layers as well, stuff that will keep you warm on the outside, like a fleece or a wool jacket. You also want to be sure that you're carrying enough under layers as well that will keep you warm at your extreme base level. This is extremely important, and there are multiple packing lists that are online. Depending on where you're planning on going, reference those particular locations, because there are always packing lists that are put out there, and they're always vetted, and you can definitely get a better understanding of what type of gear you need to bring with you when you're going out into the backcountry based off of the environment that you're going to be in. Footwear is extremely important too. I like carrying with me a Vask Gore-Tex boot. A Vask boot it has strong ankle support, and it helps with the foot and bridge support as well. It's a very durable sole. But you really want to be sure that you're taking into consideration the type of footwear and the environment that you're going to be in when you're shopping for shoes. A tennis shoe or a running shoe isn't necessarily appropriate when you're out in particularly a rocky terrain. You want to be sure that you're buying a very good shoe that will help you in the environment that you're planning on being out in. Cookware is also very important. So I like carrying with me when I go on my individual or my small group trips for a day or 2 days. I like carrying with me a jet boil. A jet boil is extremely convenient because all what you have is just a small stove top like this, and you have a thermos that's about 20 fluid ounces. And what's convenient about these types of stoves is that it's for minimal impact, quick, easy cooking. And if I have a dehydrated meal, then all I need to do is just fill this up with water up to the amount that I need. And then what I can do is I can just attach this to the canister, and I have my meal ready within 2 minutes. But that's not entirely conducive to larger group camping. If I'm going out on an expedition that has 5 or 10 individuals, a jet boil stove, as you can see, there's not a lot of surface area on this stove top. Typically, if I'm cooking, particularly in a patrol method, I want to be sure that I have a stove that is capable of cooking at a larger volume. Stoves that are helpful in these situations are solid fuel stoves, white gas. I typically enjoy using the MSR Whisper Lights. They are a much larger stove that has the surface area needed to cook in those larger group settings. But you want to be sure that you're carrying with you an adequate stove that will help you in cooking for the group that you're going to be in, and then the amount of time that you're going to be out in the backcountry as well. Again, a jet boil works great for a couple days, but when you get into those longer trips, you want to be sure that you carry with you the stove that is right for you and for the group. And you also want to be sure that you carry enough fuel with you as well, because that is extremely important. And then the miscellaneous items, your toiletries, storage carrying capacities. What I like talking about when I carry water, I mentioned before that I carry about 2 to 4 liters of water. I find that very acceptable. But I also like to carry with me larger carrying capacities as well. I like carrying with me a bladder. This is a Hydropack, and this can carry up to 4.5 to 5 liters of water. A good buddy of mine worked for this company, and I managed to get some good perks out of it. But a bladder is extremely important when carrying with you, because not only does it help in redistributing drinking water, but also if you're in an environment where you don't have a lot of accessibility to water, carrying with you extra bladders and extra carrying capacity is extremely important, and it saves you a lot of headache when you're searching for water out on the trail. So it's really important for you to take in those considerations and the amount of gear that you need when you're preparing your pack. So now we're going to talk a little bit about hard skills. These are the skills that you lean on heavily when you're in the outdoor environment, and what you can rely on for the betterment of your survival and your success in the backcountry. Navigation is the first and foremost skill that we teach no matter where you go. The main materials, the 2 materials that you need, they also tie into that first of your 10 essentials, is your map and your compass. Your map and your compass are extremely important in helping you familiarize yourself with the terrain. We talked about situational awareness, but also helping you understand the direction that you're going to be going in, and helping you identify key landmarks based off of what you see here on the map. In the outdoor community, and really anywhere for that matter, you have true north versus magnetic north. This is universal. Magnetic north is dictated just based off of what your compass tells you based off of the magnetic field where north generally lies. But true north is dictated based off of the Earth's magnetic field and the curvature of the planet. We'll talk a little bit about declination and how you can identify where specifically you want to orient your compass, and I'll dive into how to orient your map here in the next slide. But orienting your map involves using a compass to align your map with true north. And this will give you a better sense of direction that you're truly facing. If you follow a general magnetic north direction, you will get to a general location of where you're supposed to be, but depending on how far you travel, that can mean anywhere from 5 feet to 2.5 miles difference of where you're actually supposed to be. So talking a little bit about steps to orienting the map, you'll note here what you see on your screen on the left-hand side of your screen and the right-hand side of your screen is the declination map of the United States and then of the entire world. If you look at the right-hand diagram, you'll see how these lines differ based off of the magnetic field of the Earth at the current period in time. Noting at the far region of the South Pole, ranging all the way out and looping back up to the North Pole. For the United States in particular, these lines are more defined on your left-hand graph. When you're in Cincinnati, Greater Dayton area, your declination preference is about 5 degrees west. For me in Nashville, it's about 2 degrees west. And again, all of that is contingent based off of where you're located on the planet and the magnetic field that's influencing your direction. So what you want to do is you want to align your compass with your map facing north to south. So I'm not going to open up my map, but I'm going to give you a general idea. You want your compass and your map to be parallel with one another. And then you want to be sure that you're setting your bezel, the bezel of your compass, to your declination preference. So the majority of you are in Ohio, so we're going to set our compass to an Ohio bearing. So if you take a look at the compass, you'll have your bezel, and you want to set it to 5 degrees west, which would mean rotating your compass 5 degrees to the left. And that will set you out at 5 degrees west specifically for your compass. Once when you do that, then you're going to align your compass to your map, and you're going to rotate your map until the red needle on this compass, depending on where it is, red needle is in the shed. So right now I'm over a computer, so it's not able to give me an accurate bearing. But if I rotate my compass long enough with my map parallel to it, then it will give me a general idea of where north lies, which in this instance is right behind me. So this, again, is really important in aligning your map and orienting your map to understand where you are and the direction that you need to be traveling in. Again, you can get a general basis of direction based off of magnetic north, but it could mean anywhere from panning you out 500 feet off of your destination to 2.5 miles off of your destination, depending on how far you travel. So you really want to be sure that you're taking into consideration how to orient your map whenever you're out in the wilderness. So there are some simple navigation strategies, and finding your way around the backcountry requires 3 basic points of knowledge. We just talked about direction, referring to orienting the map. We also want to take into account and consideration some other things as well, such as landmarks. These are important. They serve as reference points to determine where you are and where you need to go and whether or not you're on the right trail. If ever you're navigating a major city and people tell you to look out for the Queen City Tower, or you want to look out for the AT&T Tower, say down in Nashville, you want to be sure that you familiarize yourself with what those landmarks look like, and that will give you a general understanding of where you stand in for this example, the metropolitan area. The same principle applies when you're out in the backcountry as well. You have varying degrees of elevation, and you want to familiarize yourself with geographic landmarks to help you understand, okay, if I'm going to be traveling northbound, southbound, where is this mountain or where is this particular formation in relation to where I should be? And then look around and observe your surroundings to determine whether or not you're on the right track, if it is in fact where you think it should be. And if it's not, then you want to take a backtrack and you want to understand where you went wrong. And we can talk a little bit about triangulation in another seminar later on down the line, but you want to really be sure that you're identifying the location and the geographic landmarks in your area, so that way you can familiarize yourself with that location. Relative elevation is also important, useful in understanding and recognizing nearby land formations and determining if you're on the correct route. If we're supposed to be traveling uphill to get to a destination, but I'm traveling downhill, then I know that something is seriously wrong with where I'm at and the route that I'm following. And I need to, again, fall back on those previous 2 aspects of basic navigation to help me retrace my steps and understand where I am. And again, all of this ties into situational awareness. If you're ever lost or confused, refer back to these 3 points, and that will help you get back on track. So camping and shelters. There are 2 main types of camping when you're out in the outdoors. The first is concentrated impact. It's an established site, particularly with a fire ring, set up tenting locations, sometimes utilities such as a bathhouse, etc. However, there's also low impact camping. This is dispersed camping is another term. They are non-established sites. Sometimes they're not even sites at all. Particularly with the further you go out west, you find more when you get into Bureau of Land Management lands and public lands where there are not a lot of established sites. So you want to be sure that you understand the difference in the camping setup that you have based off of the site that you're going to, and that will dictate how you prepare your gear set in going out on this journey. But no matter where you're camping, there are 4 W's that we like to follow when you're setting up your camp. You want to be on the lookout for wind. Where is the wind flow in my particular site? Am I in a valley? Am I going to get a lot of wind interference? You want to be sure that your structures aren't compromised when you're setting up, and particularly in a wide open location or in a valley that could potentially damage your structures that you're going to be sleeping in. You also want to be sure that you're watching out for water. Not just where can I get water, but how can water threaten me? And what I mean by that is low elevations next to streams. I've seen a lot of situations where individuals have camped near water beds and they weren't aware of it. And then when you would have a situation, particularly this is popular out west, with flash floods, those campsites can easily get washed out and compromised, and that will in turn threaten the safety and the livelihoods of the individuals that are in those sites. So you really want to be sure that you're monitoring the water situation and how can water threaten you in your particular site. Typically, we tell people to camp on higher ground as it poses a less risk when you're camping near a water body. You also want to be on the lookout for wildlife as well. What type of wildlife have I seen coming into my campsite? Is this an area that's prominent with black bears? Is this an area that's prominent with with snakes or with deer or mountain lions, you want to be sure that you're taking into account the wildlife that's in your surroundings, because bottom line, you are in their home, and you want to be sure that you are not a threat to them, and in turn, they are not a threat to you. You also want to be sure that you're watching out for what we call widow makers. This could be dead trees. These could be loose rocks on a hillside. You want to be sure that you don't make your partner a widow, so to speak, in camping in someplace stupid and ending your trip relatively abruptly. So you want to be sure that you're watching out for these 4 W's when you're setting up your site. When you're also setting up your site, this was a term that we used, and it's a term that can be used elsewhere in the outdoor community as well, is you want to be on the lookout for your Barometer Triangle when you arrive at a campsite. This is a smellable zone where all of your potent items such as food, trash, your cooking materials, your smellables such as your toiletries are all contained. And you want to be sure that you keep your tents outside at 50-foot distance from the Barometer Triangle. So this here is a diagram of what I refer to as a Barometer Triangle. There are 3 main points of that particular triangle. In this instance, I used a diagram out of my training book from my years working out in New Mexico. We used bear cables. Now, this could apply differently based off of where you camp, such as a place where you store your bear canisters. But ideally, a location that you store your foodstuffs and the things that you won't need immediately for the night is one of your 3 main points in your Barometer Triangle. The other side of your triangle, the other point of your triangle, is where do you dispose of your natural waste? Where do you dispose of the cooking waste that you incurred while you were eating, while you were planning while you're preparing your meal? Sometimes it could be a sump. Other times it could be a place where you simply dig into the ground and deposit that waste at an appropriate depth. And then you have the fire ring as the 3rd and final point in your Barometer Triangle. And within that location, within that triangle, sometimes it could be long, sometimes it could be short, is where you can store your dining fly and all of your cooking materials that you need for that evening. And then your tents and where you sleep are outside of that danger zone. And the reason why we have this set up is in the event that your campsite attracts wildlife, particularly larger wildlife like bears or mountain lions, you are far enough away from the zone that they will be attracted to. So that way, in the event that they do come rummaging through your camp and exploring, you are far enough away where you're safe from any potential threat that wildlife might pose. Then we'll talk a little bit about shelters. What are the common shelters? The most common survival shelter that you have in the outdoors are lean-tos. They're the most simple structure to build with minimal knowledge and not time. Make sure that your shelter is only as big as you need it to be. The larger your shelter, the harder it is to keep warm. Have you ever been into a house or potentially maybe even your room? If it's a little too large, you'll notice that it takes a lot of time for when the heater kicks in to really warm up your apartment or to warm up your building. You want to be sure that the same principle applies to your shelter as well. Keep it as small as it can be, but big enough to where you can fit in yourself and you can get a comfortable night's sleep. Identify potentially an overhang such as a log or a large rock. You can lean sticks and foliage across to provide the containment structure. You want to be sure that you're keeping out of vulnerable positions such as low ground, wind rush areas. Again, the 4W principle applies here to shelters as well. And because the structural integrity of a lean-to is a lot less sound than an actual tent, you want to be sure that you're taking into this consideration even more so. A-frame lean-tos are also another common lean-to type shelter. You can create a simple A-frame with 2 large sticks. And really, you don't even need to have any knowledge in knot tying. You can lash this together with a bootlace. A simple knot as tying your shoe will be enough to keep that A-frame together intact long enough for you to get the amount of benefit that you need out of it. And again, you can lean sticks and foliage across to provide shelter. But the one thing that you never want to do, particularly when you're building a shelter, is you never want to build a fire or cook underneath your lean-to. Again, the same principle applying back to the Barometer Triangle. You want to be sure that you're maximizing the distance between where you're sleeping and where you're cooking and eating. But in the instance of fire, you don't want to be sure that you burn your shelter to the ground and cause another situation for you. So these are some graphics of some lean-tos that you might find typically out in the wild. You can learn how to build these types of shelters through constant knot tying practice. Your most primitive shelter is in the bottom left-hand corner, where you identify a large tree or a log and you lean sticks and foliage against it to build an alcove that you can see. You can crawl into the shelter and get some warmth out of the structure that you just built. But there are a multitude of lean-tos and shelters that you can build. It's pretty cool if you have if you have an engineering push, if you want to build a cool structure, then really the sky's the limit when it comes to lean-tos. But those are the principles that you want to take into consideration when building your shelter. We're going to talk a little bit now about water purification. Treat all water, no matter where you get it, no matter where you pull it from when you're in the outdoors. And the reason for that being is that the treatment of water kills off protozoa such as Giardia and Cryptosporidium, killing off bacteria such as E. coli, dysentery, salmonella, cholera, or viruses such as hepatitis and Norwalk. And treatment methods, there are 4 main treatment methods that you can apply to treating your water. The first and the most reliable is boiling. It is time consuming, yes, but with a hefty jet boil or a good stove, it's 100% effective. Let your water reach a rolling boil for 2 minutes and let it sit for 2 minutes. And then afterwards, it is safe to drink because it's killed off all 3 of those threats in a potential water source. Purifiers are also good as well. You've seen those in particular water bottles. Sometimes you might have purifiers that you can drink directly through, and that will purify as you drink. They do remove protozoa, bacteria, and viruses. Filters also remove particles, but they don't remove any of the other 3. So you want to be sure that if you are in an area that you know you can rely on, then you are capable of using filters, but it is always encouraged for you to purify all of your water through whether it be boiling or purification in the event that you might not be anticipating any of the other 3 threats, such as bacteria or viruses, from being in your water source. I've seen a lot of people pull water out of a stream, and then I hike up 2 to 3 miles up and I see a pile of manure or a dead animal carcass in the water upstream from where they were pulling from their water source earlier on in the day. So you really want to be sure that you're monitoring your water source and where you get your water from and understand the environment that you're in. Tablets are the most effective, in my opinion. And I use a brand called Catadine. It is a micropure tablet. This releases chlorine dioxide, and its effectability, it kills waterborne bacteria and viruses that can cause disease. It's second to boiling, and tablets are second to boiling. They are also the most reliable. So I'm going to give you a brief demonstration of what water purification looks like. So after you've filled up your water, you want to be sure that you fill up your water bottle completely, and then you want to be sure that you deposit your tablet into the water. So I've already gone ahead and I've cut open one of my micropure tablets. You want to be sure that you apply 1 tablet for 1 liter of water. So for instance, for my Hydropack, this is a 5-liter container. So I want to be sure that I'm applying 5 tablets into the particular water source. But for my bottle, I'm only going to be applying 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, without zapping my computer, I'm going to apply a tablet into my water bottle. And then you're going to notice when I drop this in here that it's going to start dissolving and begin to purify my water source. When that happens, when I drop the tablet into the water, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close my water bottle so that way it doesn't release any of the gases that are released through the dissolution of the tablet. I'm not entirely sure if that is visible, but you can see through the camera that the tablet is already beginning to dissolve and purify my water. So I'm going to let this dissolve. I am going to keep talking though. When that tablet dissolves, what's happening right here in the chemistry is that's releasing that chlorine dioxide into the water and killing off any impurities, viruses, or bacteria. When that tablet has been dissolved, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn my water bottle upside down and I'm going to do a process called bleeding the thread. And what that does is that simply gets out all of the impurities, because you have the water in the bottle that's already purified. But if I filled this up underneath the spigot, or if I filled it up through the stream, I still have impurities on the threads themselves that I'm going to be putting my lip to and drinking my water out of. So you want to be sure that you're purifying all aspects of your water bottle, and that will come through the process of bleeding the thread. So we are nearly close to the dissolution of our tablet. When I go through the process of bleeding the thread, then I'm going to wait for 30 minutes. That is the amount of time, a general rule, that you want to wait on while your water is purifying. You want to be sure that it has taken the time to run its course. So we are already dissolved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip my water bottle over and I'm going to open it up ever so slightly, just enough to where you start to see water pouring out and bubbles forming up at the top. So you start to see those bubbles. Know that I've already bled the thread. I have water running down my hand, which is a good thing. You want that to happen. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn my water bottle back over, and I'm going to hike on, and I'm going to drink this water 30 minutes down the line when it's safe to drink. So you want to be sure that you give it enough time for the tablet to fully run its course. So now we're going to talk about emergency situations and scenarios. First aid is the most common situation that you're going to run into in the backcountry. There are common ailments in the outdoors. You have headaches, diarrhea, vomiting, altitude sickness, musculoskeletal injuries. Understand most of these injuries can be prevented with a healthy diet, water, and preparedness. There was an unfortunate situation that I had in my final year working out in New Mexico where we were called on a search and rescue operation to an individual that was most likely a fatality. And when we got there, unfortunately, there were some other things such as healthy diet that unfortunately contributed to that individual's passing. But primarily, the individual was not paying attention to the situations and the symptoms that he was experiencing in the lead up to that problem that could have potentially saved his life. So you want to be sure that you're monitoring those situations when you're out in the backcountry and making sure that you're keeping an eye on your friends when you're in the outdoors as well. And there are many different courses that you can learn this knowledge set at a much broader scale, such as NOLS, Stop the Bleed courses through the Red Cross, Wilderness First Aid courses. These will all better prepare you for those emergency situations and help you in the event that worst came to worst. You also have severe weather. In the event of a severe storm, you want to remove yourself from high ground. Lightning strikes at tall objects, and they strike at the least point of resistance based off of electrical current. You want to proceed to a safety stance if lightning is within 1 mile of your location. NOAA typically states that between the flash and the bang, every 5 seconds equals 1 mile. So typically you want to get into a safety stance when you're within that mile stretch of the storm. You want to spread out your group 50 feet away from one another. You want to keep your feet as close together because currents are amplified the further apart 2 points of contact are. You want to keep your hands around your ears or your neck to provide protection against sounds and debris. And you want to return from that position once when the lightning storm has vacated your position in your immediate area. Wildfires are also very common emergency situations you can run into. They're common in dry and arid climates, but they can happen anywhere. Here in Gatlinburg, we had a fire that was about 6-7 years ago that burned a lot of land. So it doesn't just happen in California. It can happen all across the country. You want to pay attention to local authorities when you're monitoring this. Your National Weather Service, or NCWeb, or your local parks and recreation departments for accurate information on these situations because you want to adequately prepare for these situations. When you're hiking, make sure you watch for fires and smoke. Be particularly observant after a lightning storm. You want to review all emergency protocol. If one doesn't exist, then you and your group develop a plan and review that plan daily. As long as you're out in the backcountry, you want to be sure that you're constantly going over that emergency plan to better prepare yourself in the event of a worst case scenario. In the event that you need to evacuate, leave behind all unnecessary equipment. That can be replaced, but you can't. You travel downhill and upwind of a fire using established roads and trails. And the reason being is that fire typically goes upward, and you don't want to be downwind of a fire because that will catch up to you very quickly, and it's impossible for you to outrun a fire as they can travel anywhere from 6 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour and reach temperatures as hot as 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. An personal anecdote of mine is when I worked out in New Mexico in 2018, we had what was called the U Park fire. That fire started out as a smoldering lightning strike in the middle dead heat of the summer. It didn't happen immediately after a storm, but it happened a couple days afterward. The heat and the environment, the dry environment that we found ourselves in New Mexico during that particular year, you'll recall that the big campfire in 2018 in California also happened in that same fire season. But that fire started out at 20 to 30 acres within the first hour. By the end of the day, that had grown to nearly 1,500 acres. And by the next day, it nearly like doubled, tripled within the first hours of the morning, ranging up to 30,000 acres at the end of its containment. And you can see based off of the map that's provided here of just how quickly that fire spread and the amount of fuel that it consumed. That's another thing that you want to be mindful of when you're in the outdoors is take into consideration the amount of fuel that you find yourself surrounded in. In the event of a fire, you want to be sure that you're removing yourself from those environments completely in order to minimize the threat that a fire may pose against you. And a good source for monitoring these particular situations, any natural disaster for that matter, is going to the Incident Information System, otherwise commonly known as NCWeb. It's a government site, and it is very well informed, and it's very self-intuitive, and it provides you adequate information and detailed information on all of the natural disasters that are occurring in the United States. This snapshot was taken this morning at 10:25, and you can see all of the situations that are developing particularly in the Southwest, but also in northern regions as well in the country. And that will help give you a general understanding of what are the emergency situations that are ongoing and what threat does that pose to me in my particular area. So to wrap this up, wilderness survival is not a reactionary skill set, but a preparatory skill set. You want to be sure that you devote strategic time to plan ahead and prepare for your journey. You can attend courses and read literature. There's a lot of literature out there, and I don't have any of the list of what is capable of providing you with good information, but some general information that can be provided if you go to a NOLS course. You go to your courses provided by the Red Cross or courses that are provided online through FEMA. Also be sure that you ask your Parks and Recreation, your local law enforcement, your fire departments, your state government on training courses that can help better prepare you for experience in your journey. Again, time spent preparing equals success in execution, and survival skill sets are preparatory, and it is a positive thing to do. Don't be concerned or scared of this, because in the end, it will mean the difference between an awesome journey and a miserable journey. And I hope that you learned something from this, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you all so much. Now get out and take a hike.
All right, Will, thank you so much. No one leaves just yet. As Will had mentioned, he's willing to take some questions. Again, we're going to throw that thing up on the bottom of the screen, the reminder of asking a question. So as he's answering some of these, if you have a question or if one comes up, please submit that, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can. So I will be kind of proctoring those questions and sending them Will's way. Again, Will, thank you for the incredible presentation. That was so detailed and an incredible amount of information. The first question that I want you to present to you is in terms of carrying a weapon in the wilderness, whether it be a gun or whether it be bear spray, any other things. What's your opinion, or what is your suggestion on carrying something to protect yourself while in a wilderness or survival situation?
Good question. So I'll address the bear spray question first, and then I'll address the firearms afterwards, with the caveat that I am not an expert in personal defense or in firearms. So I can't give you any advice on what type of firearm you need to get or what will better help you in those emergency situations. But for bear spray, a lot of people like to bring mace out in the backcountry with them as a precautionary measure against wildlife incursion. A majority of the time, most wildlife will leave you alone if you respect your distance between yourself and them. It's another one of the principles of leave no trace, is respecting visitors and respecting wildlife. If you give yourself enough distance between yourself and an animal, typically they will leave you alone. You're in their home, so they're just as much curious as you are about why each of you are there. More often than not, they're just sniffing you out. They're just wanting to see, who is this visitor that's in my territory. They're confused, and they want to have a little bit of inquiry. When it comes to more aggressive animals such as bears or mountain lions, again, you want to be sure that you're taking an appropriate measure of preparedness towards that. Most black bears, and that is the common bear species that we find here in North America, the American black bear, they are very, very dumb, for lack of a better word, but they're just like big dogs. They want to learn a little bit about who you are and why you're in their territory, and they're not aggressive unless you come into contact with them and you threaten them. Then they will act aggressive, and then they will lash out. The same thing with mountain lions. More often than not, if you travel in large groups, in fact, if you always travel in large groups, then a mountain lion or a predator animal will never bother you, because they are afraid of size. Particularly with mountain lions, they hunt vulnerable individual animals. That does not apply when it comes to a group setting. Now, I'll address the firearm question. Keep in mind that wilderness survival and preparation is geared towards safety. So never bring a firearm with you unless you're zeroed in on your equipment and you understand what the potential threat that firearm could carry with you when you're bringing it out into the backcountry. Make sure that you have that appropriately holstered and safety on. You don't have you don't have a round in the chamber, and you understand where that weapon is at all times. You want to be sure that you are conscientious of bringing out with you any firearms, because if mishandled inappropriately, then that not only poses a danger and a threat to you and your personal safety, but also the safety of individuals around you. So you want to be sure that if you bring a firearm with you, you know that firearm and you understand the dangers and the threats that it could pose if it were to be mishandled, and then store that appropriately so that way that does not become an issue.
Perfect. Well, we've had several questions come in regarding the water for purification question. And so one of the things someone asked is, and this was an interesting question, is in terms of locating, water, what are some tips to locate water that not only, water that's going to be there, but water that is more likely to be clean and pure and able to be drank if you did not have ways to purify it?
Yeah. So water can typically be found in low elevations. And the reason being is that natural process of erosion, you're not going to find water at high points in solid rock formations. Water will also take the path of least resistance. So whenever you're looking for water, one of the general principles is to travel downhill, because eventually you will come in contact with a water body. The other principle that you want to take into consideration when you're pulling water from is, what type of environment am I in? Out west, you have a lot of cattle. So you want to be sure that when you're pulling water, that you're pulling water from a source that, or at least if you want to know what has gone to that water source previously, if that is a spigot or if that is a stream or a spring, you want to be sure of where you're pulling your water from, because that could mean the difference between just humans pulling out of that water, or that could mean cattle and other animals that have drank from that water as well. And that is what brings in a lot of bacteria into those water sources if you're pulling from a natural flowing water source. So you want to be sure that you've familiarized yourself with the territory that you're in, and what other wildlife and natural processes might be around you, and understanding, is this water okay for me to drink? Never pull water directly from a still standing water source. Typically that means there's not a current, so that water isn't getting cycled, it's not being oxidized, and that is the first red flag in identifying that there could be bacteria or viral agents in the water body.
Okay, wonderful. And kind of keeping on that same topic with water, we've had several come through. Someone asked with both the tablets or with the filters. We understand they work, some of them work on viruses and different things, but what about chemical contaminants? So if you're in an area where the water may be contaminated by chemicals that were introduced by us, does any of those work in that situation?
That is highly contingent on the type of product that you buy. Chlorine dioxide, which is what I use for my micropure tablets, do take care of most chemical agents. But you want to be sure that when you're buying the product, you take a look at the product information, because that will tell you what that's used for. Another reason why I am very much against filtration systems is because they do not filter out those chemical agents. Whenever you are pulling water from any sort of body, and if you have any sort of concern about that, about the chemical contaminants that are brought on through human footprint, you want to be sure that you're utilizing product that is capable in removing those agents, or at least minimizing their impact. And that could come from tablets, and that can also come from boiling your water as well. But you really want to be sure that you're devoting strategic time to identify the right equipment that you get when you're pulling water. Always, at least for me, whenever I've come into contact with chemical agents in the water, I've always gone somewhere else to find water. And again, that is one of the other added benefits of carrying with you a secondary carrying storage unit for your water, so that way in the event that you run into those situations, you can fall back on your emergency reserve and find another location. Because more often than not, those chemicals that are introduced by humans are isolated to that one or two water body sources that are in that general area, and they don't spread out dramatically over a wide range of distance.
Wonderful. My next question is, how would you, in the event you're in a survival situation, if you did not have a fire starter kit, do you have any suggestions on the best way to start a fire?
So when you're in the backcountry, when you're starting a fire, I believe I lost my map and my compass. Magnification ignition is also really good. On most compasses, you have a magnification lens at the top of your compass. It'll typically look like a circle, and it probably won't come out on this, but you can see there's a magnification lens here. That is a good way to start your fire. Hold it over a source of natural light, which would be the sun. If you're in, if it is a clear and acceptable day, find a dry kindling. These could be leaves. Make sure that they're not wet, or pine needles. You don't really want to do this over large sources of fuel like a log or a stick. You want to be sure that you get enough magnification to ignite a small amount of foliage or kindling, and there you can build your fire from that magnification source. And that's just one way in terms of a magnification start. There's also a friction start. If you're unable to start a fire entirely, if it's been rainy, if it's been stormy, all of your fuel is wet, you have no way to start a fire, then you want to be sure that you're positioning yourself in an environment that has the least amount of wind resistance, that's dry. Find a rock overhang, and get as close and as tightly compacted in as you can. And that's one of the purposes of building the lean-to shelter, is that by building that, you build an enclosed space that you will allow your natural body heat to keep you warm. And you'd be surprised how durable your body is in that situation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Another question came through about the chlorine dioxide tablets. Do those have a shelf life or a time period in which they're no longer good?
So most chlorine dioxide tablets, particularly for these, have a shelf life of 25 to 30 years. I mean, I've had these since my time. I think this particular sleeve was from my 3rd year out in New Mexico. So that's been at least 5 years. So you want to, with most of these, they have a long lasting shelf life. But again, whenever you're shopping for that, be sure that you're looking at the product information to get the adequate information for that. So you don't want to be buying something that will only last you for a year.
Yeah. Another question came through, and that was, in the event that, a lot of the different resources that you provided would really be, heavily dependent on having a cell phone or cell phone service. But say you got in a situation where you didn't have a cell phone or you didn't have cell phone service, is there any way that you can figure out some of those same things without cell service, whether that be, if there's an incident coming or inclement weather or things like that?
Yeah. So again, tying all the way back into my initial principle of planning ahead and preparing, that first factor of situational awareness, that ties into understanding weather patterns before you go. That was why that slide was mentioned, that was titled Before You Go. You want to be sure that you have a general understanding of the weather threats that might be in your area. You never want to, and again, survival is a preparatory measure. It's not a reactionary measure. You want to be sure that you're preparing for those situations. So in the event that my phone were to die on me and I have no way of looking up the weather radar, then I have a general understanding of what the weather patterns might look like and how I can prepare to respond to that. If it comes down to it, if you find yourself in an inclement weather situation that you were not prepared for, then you've taken at least the time to consider what the weather might look like in the days and weeks leading up to your trip, that you have a general idea about how to respond to that. And again, that ties into what type of essentials you put in your pack, such as rain gear and extra clothing and a means to keep warm, shelter, or understand where you can go to seek shelter in those outdoor environments.
Okay. One question that came through is about local foraging. So if you find yourself in that situation, maybe you don't have an opportunity to have something packed with you, is there a way that you can learn about local foraging ahead of time, or even on the fly, like while you're there, to forage for food until you can get back to a position where you have something to eat?
Absolutely. So in every climate has its own flora and fauna. For instance, berries. Berries is the most popular form of food that people resort to when it comes to foraging for needs. What you really want to be sure that you familiarize yourself with is what type of plants are good for you and what type of plants are not good for you in terms of consumption. Because the last thing that you want to have happen to you is eat something that could even further add detriment to your experience. So familiarize yourself early on with nature guides, flora guides that are in your area. Again, planning ahead and preparing, knowing where you're going, understand what type of plants are around in your area. But if you run into a situation where you had not had the opportunity to think about, what type of berry is good for me versus what berry is not good for me, understanding that most general foliage can provide basic nutritional needs for your survival. But when it gets down to the specifics of berries or foodstuffs that you might be hunting for out in the backcountry, then make sure that you familiarize yourself through those guides.
Wonderful. I think I'm going to hit on one more question, and then that'll be the last one of the day. And the question was, and they're tied together. It was from the same person. They had asked, number one, what is an ideal goal weight for you to have in your pack? And number two, is there an ideal number of calories that you want to consume per day if you're in that situation?
So for the weight, general rule of thumb is about a third of your body weight is an acceptable amount to carry in your pack. Now, again, that's contingent on how long your journey is, who you're hiking with, how many people are in your group, because there are ways that you can distribute that weight evenly amongst the members of your group if you're in a larger group. But ideally, you want to carry about a third of your body weight, and that is all inclusive of your personal gear, crew gear, and water and other supplemental needs such as foodstuffs. So in total, you want to carry about a third of your body weight. To the point on what was that? What was their second question?
The second part was, how many calories should you ideally aim for to consume in a day?
So on average, an individual on average consumes about 2,500 to 2,700 calories. Depending on the strenuous level of your trip, whether you're hiking or if you're just planning on going and camping, ideally you want to shoot for a little bit higher calorie intake, because you want to be sure that you're giving yourself enough energy to supply your body with the nutritional needs to perform and function in an austere environment. Because you're doing a lot more work and a lot more labor. Even if you hit the gym constantly, if you've been running constantly, there are muscle groups that you're activating when you're out in the outdoors that your body is not used to engaging with when you're in a gym or when you're running on a track or a treadmill. So you want to be sure that you're consuming a little bit more than what you actually need to provide your body with the basic supplement. And when you go to most stores, when you take a look at the calorie count on dehydrated foods from REI, you'll be blown away, because it's more than what a quarter pounder meal would be at McDonald's. There is a reason for that, because it provides you the energy, because they are anticipating that you will be in an environment where you're exerting yourself more than what you would in a natural real world setting.
Okay. Well, thank you Will, I want to thank you, number one, for the presentation. Number two, for taking as many questions as you have. This has been wonderful. Hopefully, and some of the questions and comments people have coming in as they learn stuff they had never heard of before, which I think is, part of the reason we do this is we want to provide people with an opportunity to learn and gain experiences that are going to help them reach new heights, do new things. And that's why we have the Life Hacks series. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank the Alumni Association of Oxford for helping to host this on their platform. Again, thank you to Will. And I want to thank you to the alumni and friends who joined us today. The reason that we do this is you guys, we want to continue to provide wonderful engagement opportunities for you, both virtually and in person. So for those who have not met, we look forward to seeing you in person. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. This will be recorded if you want to go back and look through the slides and the information. Just look on the ALC page. So thank you and have a wonderful day.